15. So let's go over that first. All right, number 12. Which chemical substance controls growth, digestion, and other automatic activities? That is a hormone. Number 13. What group of glands help the thyroid gland control blood calcium? That is the parathyroid gland, so parathyroid. Number 14. What disease occurs when the islets of Langerhans fail to produce enough insulin? That is diabetes mellitus. Technically, it's type 1 diabetes mellitus. So if you wrote type 1 diabetes mellitus, that's it. That's the perfect name that you want to know for. If you just wrote diabetes, keep in mind that you want to be as exact as possible. So diabetes mellitus in type 1, technically. Number 15. What is the job of the pineal gland? That controls waking and sleeping. We'll talk more about that maybe today, but probably tomorrow with how much we have to get done. Okay, so for your classwork, you're going to take out your activity book. You're going to need all of your books today. So you're going to take out your activity book, this one, and you're going to answer the back of activity C. So it's page 16. You only have a few questions. You're going to find the answers on pages 91 to 96. Now, I emailed your parents about this, but you're having a quiz today. So this will help you kind of focus to think of what are some important things that you need to study, as well as focusing on the bold terms, the italicized terms, the skeleton, the muscles that you need to know. So all of that we'll review in a minute, but use your time profitably. So don't just go through these questions super quick. Pay attention to pages 91 through 96 and study those on your own so that way you can get ready for it. Alright, so go ahead and pause the video. You want to spend probably about 5 to 10 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, but you want to spend about 5 to 10 minutes just studying, looking over it. I'll review with you once we come back. Okay, so hopefully you pause the video and come back by this point, so let's go over it. Alright, so to think about it, a cleft palate occurs when the tissues in the roof of the mouth do not completely form during fetal development. Which bone does not correctly form in a child with a cleft palate? Alright, so it's asking, it's assessing this one in the roof of your mouth, so that is the top bone of your jaw. So that bone has to be the D maxilla, or maxilla, try to both of them at once. So D for number 1. The tissue of the joints naturally break down over time. Arthritis is a painful condition that occurs when the tissues are so thin they allow one bone to rub, the bone of the joint to rub on the other bone. What part of the joint is worn away? Remember, what's that kind of protective covering? It's not just asking about ligaments. It's saying, okay, what's the protective covering that keeps the bones from grinding or bumping into each other? That's C, cartilage. Number 3, a second-degree burn damages the top 2 layers of the skin. What is the lowest layer of skin damaged by this type of burn? Alright, so this one's kind of a tricky one because they put the 4 different terms down. So remember, epidermis is the outside layer, dermis is the middle layer, and then subcutaneous, you want to mark that term, not just hypodermis. I know it's there, but you want to make a note of subcutaneous. Now it's asking for a second-degree burn. It's gone through which lower layer? Well, the lowest layer in a second-degree burn, if it's the epidermis and the dermis, and remember second-degree means it goes through those 2 layers, so that means it has to be the dermis for that one, letter C. Alright, number 4, albinism is a condition that occurs when the body cannot produce the brown pigment primarily responsible for skin color. What pigment is this? Hopefully at this point you recognize, oh okay, D, that's melanin. Alright, you can go ahead and put this away for right now. And so let's review. So if you don't know these terms and definitions, you want to pause and go over them one last time. But I'm just going to ask them in a question style so I can try to get through them as much as possible. I'm going to shift over just a little bit. Alright, what is the main organ of the integumentary system? Skin. Perfect. Now if you're talking about your skin, there are those 3 layers. What's that outermost layer? It's made up of dead cells. Epidermis. What's that middle layer? It has a lot of your nerves and some blood vessels, not your major ones though. Dermis. What's that bottom layer? It has your major blood vessels and the adipose tissue. It connects your skin to the muscle underneath it. Or bones. Subcutaneous. Hypodermis, but subcutaneous. Alright, what is the main brown pigment for your skin? There's other pigments, but what is the brown one? This is the most important one. Melanin. We've already gone over that. Okay, let's see. What is the 2 parts of your skeletal system? Remember, you have the center part, and then you have the part with your arms and legs. What are those 2 parts? Good job. Axial skeleton, that's the one down the center. And then appendicular skeleton, that's the one with your appendages, or your arms and legs. What do you call the part of your bones that make the red blood cells? It's that soft, kind of porous center of your bones. Fatty tissue. Right, it's the marrow. So make a note for that. That is the part of your bones, that center portion of a long bone in particular, that makes the red blood cells. Let's see, there are 4 different types of bones. What are they? Good job. Long bone, short bone, regular bone, flat bone. So good job for those. Alright, let's go over the parts of your skeletal system. So talking about the bones that you need to know. Alright, we'll just start at the top and just work our way down. Alright, what's the part of your skull that contains your brain? Cranium. What is those frontal bones? What's the top portion of your jaw called? Maxillae or maxilla, if you're talking about one at a time. What do you call that bottom bone of your, it's the lower jawbone. It is the only one that can move. Mandible. Alright, looking at his shoulder area, what do you call this bone back here, your shoulder blade? Scapula. What do you call the bone in the front then? This is your collarbone. Clavicle. Alright, what do you call the technical name for the backbone? Vertebral column. What if you're talking about the individual bones of the vertebral column? What do we call those? Vertebrae. What do you call this whole cavity area, all of these bones together to help protect your thoracic cavity? Your ribs. What do you call your breastbone? What's the technical name for that? Sternum. Alright, looking at this bone, what is the name for this bone of your arm? Humerus. Good. What's the technical name for the bones of your fingers? Phalanges. Alright, what is the name for these fused bones in your hip area? What do you call this one that helps out with your hips? Alright, that's the sacrum. What do you call your tailbone? The coccyx. What do you call the bones of your hips themselves? Your pelvis. Good job. What do you call the bone in your leg? This is the longest bone in your body. Shift down just a little bit. What do you call this bone in your leg? Your femur. And then what do you call the bones of your toes? Phalanges. Perfect. Alright, we'll move Ted back over a little bit and I'll shift back up. Alright, so those are all the major bones that you need to know. What do you call those hollow spaces in your skull that help your voice to resonate, to make your voice have its distinctive your distinctive tone or your voice quality? It also helps lighten your skull. Your sinuses. Good job. Let's see. Alright, what do you call that smooth tissue that's in your joints so that way they're not grinding or bumping into each other? Cartilage. We already talked about that one. What do you call the type of tissue that connects bones to other bones? That strong connective tissue. What do we call that? Ligament. Good. Alright, there are 3 different types of joints that you need to know. What's the joint that's at your elbow? It allows your arm or your bones there to just swing back and forth like a door on the hinge. What do you call that type of joint? Hinge joint. Perfect. What do you call the type of joint that's at your elbow as well? It allows you to rotate your arm. What do you call that type of joint? Pivot, I almost said pelvic joint. Pivot joint, good job. So pivot joint. What's one that's in your shoulders and in your hips? It allows the most freely movable joint in your body. It allows the most freedom of motion. What joint is that? Ball and socket. Perfect. Alright, there are 2 different types of, well, going back a little bit, what do you call a break or crack in a bone? Fracture. There's 2 different types you need to know this year. What do you call it if it's not sticking out of your body? It's just broken on the inside. A simple or closed fracture. What if it's broken and it's sticking outside of your body now? It's pierced through the skin. That is a compound or open fracture. Alright, what type of strong connective tissue connects bones to muscles? Tendons. Good. Alright, so thinking about your muscles, what's the muscle in your shoulder area? I can't show this one very well. That's your deltoid. Allows you to raise your arm out to the side. What's the muscle in your chest area that allows you to push an object away from you? That's your pectorals. Then what's the muscles in your arm to where if you want to pull up your arm, what's this top muscle? That's biceps brachii. What's the muscle underneath it? That's the triceps brachii. So just make a note for those four. If you need to review those, make sure you do. Let's see, what do you call the anchor point for a bone? The anchor point for a muscle. So if you're thinking for like your biceps brachii, it pulls, and it can only pull in one direction. So what do you call that anchor point that's in your shoulder area? Origin. And then what do you call the point where it connects to the bones, your radius and your ulna, and it pulls them up? So what do you call that point where it's pulling towards the origin? Insertion. Good job. So insertion. Alright, so what do you call a muscle that you can control consciously with your mind? You can decide to move your arms or move your legs. What do we call those types of muscles? Voluntary muscles. Good. Or skeletal muscles, but voluntary muscles. What do you call a muscle that you can't, that'll move whether or not you want it to, like your heart and your diaphragm? They're going to go, well, they're going to work when, even if you don't think about them. Involuntary muscles. Good. Alright, thinking about your nervous system, what's the purpose of your nervous system? To coordinate the activities of your body. I didn't ask this earlier. What's the purpose of your muscular system? To provide movement for your body. What's the purpose of the skeletal system? To give your body rigidity and support. And then what's the what's the function of the integumentary system? Remember, integumentary system is your skin, so it's just to be like that shield to keep everything on the inside that's supposed to be on the inside, and everything out, all of the bad things like pathogens and bacteria outside your body. Alright, there are two parts to your central nervous system, kind of like a skeleton. What are they? Central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. There are two parts to your central nervous system. What are those two parts? Remember, it's your brain and your spinal cord. And your spinal cord is housed in your vertebral column. Let's see, what do you call the bundles of fibers that connect the nervous system to the rest of your body? How does your brain and your spinal cord talk to like your arm or your toes? What does it use? What are those fibers? So not the electrical messages. What do you call those bundles of fibers? Alright, those are nerves. Now what do you call the electrical messages that travel along the nerves? So kind of like letters, but they're electrical in how they transmit them. Right, those are impulses. Let's see. Alright, that's everything from those pages. So if you need to pause really quick in order to study to go over this one last time, you can, but make sure you come back. Alright, so if you've unpaused the video now, you want to go ahead and take out one piece of paper and just a pen, so that way you can write down your answers. You don't need your textbook or a pencil or anything like that with you on the table. So because of that, wherever you're at, if you're sitting at a table or if you're sitting in the living room or if you're sitting in your bedroom, make sure you clear off everything so that way you can have space, so that way you can think clearly, and so that way you can write well. So you just need just a blank piece of paper. So go ahead and take out a piece of notebook paper and just a pen. So if you need to go pause it to go get that, that's fine. Just make sure that you have those two things. Those are the only things you should have on the table with you, or on your desk, or wherever it is that you're sitting. Be sure to write your name and the date at the top like you do normally at school. If you wanted to write just science quiz, that's fine. If you want to write quiz 9 at the top, that's also fine as well. But make sure you have your name and the date, so I know whenever I print off the quizzes later, I know whose is who. So make sure it is important to have your name and date at the top. So you want to treat it just like you're at school. You don't need a cover sheet for obvious reasons, but you definitely want to make sure you have everything cleared off. Just have that piece of paper, your pen, write your name and date at the top. Number it 1 through 10, just like you do normally at school. Alright, so number 1, what of the 3 layers of your skin, what is that outermost layer that everyone can see that's made up of dead cells? What is that outermost layer of your skin? Number 2, what is the most important pigment in your skin? It produces the brown color, or the shades of brown. What do you call that most important pigment in your skin? It produces the brown color, or the darker pigment color. Number 3, what do you call the soft fatty tissue in the center of a long bone that makes the red blood cells? What do you call that? What do you call the soft fatty tissue in the porous center of a long bone? It makes the red blood cells. What do we call that? Number 4, we're going to use Ted for this part, so it'll be a little bit easier for y'all to see. What do you call this bone right here? So your lower jawbone, what do we call this bone? Number 5, I'm going to have to spin Ted around for this one. What do you call this bone right here? This is your shoulder blade, but what do we call this bone? You're going to spin Ted back. Alright, what do you call this bone right here? This is number 6. What do you call this bone right here? Alright, number 7. I lost my spot. Hang on. No, I didn't. Number 7. What is the most freely movable joints in your body? They're in your shoulders and in your hips. What do you call the most freely movable joints in your body? They're in your shoulders and in your hips. What do we call those joints? Alright, number 8, 9, and 10 are true-false questions. So you can simply write true or you can simply write false. So these are just true or false questions. So be sure to fully write out the word though. Write the full word true or write the full word false. Alright, whenever you connect a muscle to a bone, it is connected by this connective tissue called a ligament. If it's from a muscle to a bone, that is called a ligament. True or false? Alright, number 9. Whenever you're talking about the muscles, and whenever you're talking about how one side, about how there's that anchor point, and then there is the point that is pulled towards the anchor point, what do we call that point that is anchored for the muscle? So what do you call that relatively immobile part? That's the anchorage for the muscle, and it'll pull towards that anchorage point. What do we call that? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to reword it as a true or false question. I'm sorry. So we call that as the origin point. True or false? I forgot how I worded that for a second. So, true or false, we call this the origin point. So number 9, sorry about that. True or false, we call this point the anchorage point. We call that the origin. True or false? Number 10, true or false. Muscles that do their work whether or not you think about them, we call those involuntary muscles. So muscles that will do their work whether or not you consciously think about them, those are called involuntary muscles. True or false? Alright, so if you need something repeated, you can go back and rewind to that particular section for it. So be sure to go ahead and take that piece of paper, put it off to the side now. You can give it to your mom or dad or grandma or whoever's with you so they can take a photo of it and they can email it to me later. But just put it off to the side. Don't forget, so that way they can email it to me today. Alright, you can go ahead and get out your second draft of your background paper. Hopefully you have it on your computer or maybe you have it printed out in front of you so that way you can look at it as I'm going over what are some things you should be working on. So you should go ahead and get this book out as well. So that way we can go through what you need to work on for it. So you can put your textbook away just for right now and we can get into this. Now I can't show the screen and talk about it with my computer at the same time that I'm talking. So I'm going to go ahead and actually shift it over and I'm going to go sit at my computer so that way I can gesture and point to things and click on the computer. My computer has to stay plugged in over there. So that's the reason why I'm going to have to be off to the side. So I'll just make sure I talk loud so that way you can still hear me. But we're going to be focusing by looking at the screen since that's where the sample for your background paper is. And I think it'll be more useful to hear it that way. Alright, so guidelines for writing the background. So this starts on page 13 in your book. So if you want to go ahead and look at that as well, you can go ahead and get that out. So that's where the information for the background starts, page 13. Let's go ahead and let's flip over though to page number 17 with your sample background paper. And we're going to talk about how to format it like this. Okay, I think it shows up. I'm going to take the tablet with me so that way I can see how it looks to you all as best as I can. Okay, I don't know if I can make it any bigger because I think it'll throw off my formatting. So I'll make it bigger in a second, but being able to read my sample background isn't important as we talk through this. Alright, so first thing you need to note, and we've already talked about these, so just checking your formatting. So look at your paper to make sure you're fixing all these things with it. So I think you can see my mouse in this. Maybe, let's see. I think it shows up more on your screen than it does on my small screen with the tablet. Alright, so you want to check, looking at the top of your screen, you want to check to the background that you have those 1-inch margins all the way around. I'm going to turn on my proofreading marks, so that way you can see the spacing and stuff for it. So I believe this shows up better on yours. Again, if you're trying to watch this on phone, I'm sorry, it's not going to be that big. So I'll try to talk about it and explain everything as I'm going through it as well. But just make sure that you're looking at your book, because that's the same way for it. Alright, so you want to turn on 1-inch margins. If you don't know how to do that, you go to page layout at the top of the screen, and you can turn on the margins, the custom margins as well. So margins, for mine, I already have it set up for the normal, so 1-inch margins all the way around. So if I wrote on your paper to check margins, that's what I'm telling you to do. A lot of you had the 1-inch margin at the top and on the sides, but you didn't have the 1-inch margin at the bottom. So looking at this, I can actually tell just by looking at it that there's more than 1 inch down here. So to fix that, if you're trying to put something at the very bottom of your screen, you just get rid of the extra spaces, and you can make it go all the way down to that last bit as far as it can. Now you have to be careful, because if you press too far, it'll go over onto the next page. You don't want that. So if you're trying to put something at the very bottom, you can see now that, okay, this is 1 inch. So just to show you, here is the 1-inch margin at the bottom. So some of you on your first page, I could tell that there was too much space down here. It was probably because you were trying to add in page numbers. So if you don't know how to do page numbers properly, don't worry about it. Just leave them off. I don't require page numbers. So if you're trying to put in page numbers and they weren't working right, you were having too much space down here. That's more important to me than the page numbers. So if you can't get the page numbers to work, don't worry about it. But I want that 1-inch margin all the way around. So definitely check for that. Remember, you should have the heading centered, and it's not in all caps. It's going to change a little bit later on. Now, you want, if you leave the whole thing double spaced, you only want 1 space in between it. Or the better way to do this, if you want to just get rid of that awkward space, because some of you were having some weird extra spacing. The reason that happens is because if you go into your paragraph settings, so you right click on paragraph, if you have any type of after spacing, it starts to do weird things. That's how come some of you were having too much extra space. That's like how I would write in some of yours, check your spacing, because you had after space turned on and it's creating too much space. If you want to just get around that altogether, what you do, you can right click, go to paragraph, you can set it to single space and no after spacing at all. Whenever you do that, you just press, whoops, it had turned on double spacing again. Yep, let me fix that really quick. Right click, paragraph, okay. Whoop, that was not what I wanted to do. Alright, so I'll make sure I have all this single space just for now, so I can check this stuff, so I can fix that. So paragraph, 0 line spacing, 0 space, sorry, single space. If you press enter twice, it'll give you this good, solid, clean, just that space for it. That'll give you about ½ inch of spacing, which is what you want to shoot for. Then you can take the rest of your actual background paper, turn it back to double space, and that'll remove that weird extra spacing, so that way you have a good, clean looking paper. I accidentally lost my indent. Let me fix that. Nope, wrong part. Almost. Alright, so that's how you fix that if you want that good, perfect, just a single space for it. But again, if you leave it at double space though throughout the whole thing, you want to make sure though you don't have any other after space turned on. So I have 2 there. So I'm going to get rid of 1. Put that back in the center so it's easier. So that is close enough in my opinion to that ½ inch mark. But if you keep having spaces for it, if you turn on after space, then it's going to be too long. So you can either just leave it just one point like this, but turn off the after spacing, or you can just switch it to single space. That way it's a good clean mark there. That's what I would recommend, is having just 2 single spaces there, because that makes it look a little bit nicer and it's a good clean divide. If you leave it like this though, that's okay, but we will probably want to adjust it a little in our next paper, so that way it's a little bit easier to read, and so that way it looks a little bit nicer for the judges. Alright, so just make a note though that you should have the proper font size. So I believe that everyone followed that one correctly, so double check your font size just to make sure. Your book tells you it should be between 14 and 18 point font. This is 14 right now, so this is 14 font, 14, 18 point font. You want to check your length, so 300 to 350 words. I did an approximation for most of you to try to guess to see how many words do you typically have. So I didn't do a full on count, but I just checked. So some of you, I just wrote double check your word counts because it felt a little bit short or a little bit over, so just double check that. Alright, so remember it has to be written in third person. You can't use the words I, me, you at all, so it has to be talking about them or they or a person. So you can't use I, me, you, so be careful for that. Be sure to use a ½ inch indent. I already referenced that, so make it up you have a ½ inch indent. Let's see, remember you're supposed to have 3 to 6 paragraphs total. Some of you only have 2 paragraphs, so double check that. Make sure you have 3 paragraphs. So that way it's first 2 about whatever it is your background is about, whether it's magnetism or friction or electric circuits. Make sure it's about more of what it is and how it works. And then that last paragraph, you want to just list off, here are 3 possible demonstrations or 3 possible experiments that can be used with this topic. So that way, worst case scenario, you have a couple of backup plans. Remember, the final draft has to be typed, so if you haven't typed it yet, go ahead and type it. It'll make life easier for you. Let's see. Alright, so if you look on page 15, we're talking about how do you revise the first draft. This is what you want to be looking at as well. So you want to check to make sure it has unity. If I wrote on your paper topic sentence at all, that's what I'm telling you to check. Make sure you have a topic sentence, and then everything falls underneath that topic sentence. Some of you are trying to include random information in your paragraph. Don't do that. Make sure you have a good topic sentence that connects all the ideas together. Alright, does it have coherence? Are the ideas organized so the thought flows smoothly from beginning to end? If I wrote on your paper you need to organize your material, that's what I'm telling you to do. I'm telling you that it's not very organized. It doesn't have coherence, so you need to rework it and try to make it so it flows from one thought to the other. Alright, does it have an overall background structure to your topic? Is it clear and is it complete? So have you thought through everything that you need to? Some of you, I told you need to update or change some things, so that way it works a little bit better with what the background paper is supposed to do. So make sure you fix and you are working on all those things for it. So those are some of the things that you need to work on. Your book points out you can have someone read your paper and give an overall impression, so parents can read it. Now they're not supposed to help you with your grammar and sentence structure and things like that. That's your job. You're old enough and it's not their job to fix it for you. But just to help see, okay, does it have unity? Does it have coherence? Does it make sense? Does it seem like it flows well? It's okay for your parents to give you a little bit of feedback in that regard, but they can't write the paper for you. This is your paper. You need to work on it, and so it's not their job to fix it for you. Alright, so your book points out that your final draft, you're going to type it. Now, the final draft has to have that title page. So the title page is not on this page, so it's actually over on page 33. So I'm going to go back to the computer in a second. The page 33, that's where it gives a sample for the investigations title page. You need one for your background paper as too. So I'm going to head back to my computer so you can see this one. Alright, for your title page, so here's a sample of what the title page should look like. You'll notice that there's something different about the title page from the rest of your paper. For example, the title page has 2-inch margins. So if you go into page layout and then go into margins, you can go into custom margins. And I already have it set for 2 inches at the top, 2 inches at the bottom, 1 inch on the left, and 1 inch on the right. I think it shows up, but again, if you're trying to watch this on a cell phone, I don't know how big this is going to be. So that's how you can go in with the page setup and fix it that way, because it says 2-inch margins at the top and bottom, which is different from the rest of your paper. So you probably have to say this is a separate document. You'll notice that the title on the title page is all caps. So for this one, it says investigation plan. Obviously, this is a background paper, so you would write background. Everyone should say background. Don't put magnetism, don't put STEM project, don't put anything else. It should be background. So background should be there. Going down, you will notice that the bottom of it, this is single spaced. So make sure that you don't have it in double space. The title page is single spaced. You write your name. So I just put John Smith, that's a common name. You could have, so you would put your name instead. Don't write John Smith for real. So so you just write your name there. The date that it is due. If you remember, you might have written it down that the final draft was supposed to be due on October 9th. We're changing that because that's whenever exams are due, and we don't want y'all to worry about your life science, well, your exams as well as your paper. So I'm making it the Monday afterwards. So instead of it being on the 9th, you can go ahead and change it to the 12th, because that's when your paper is due now. So I'm kicking it back. You have an extra weekend. So instead of having just one weekend, you have two now. So that's nice. But make sure you want to work out. Miss Morris, so I told you this last time. I'm still not married. I'm still Miss Morris. If you want to change it to Ms. Morris, that's okay. That's fine. I'll take that title too. But definitely it's Miss or Ms., not Mrs., not married. Probably won't be married in the next couple of months. So Miss Morris. The class is life science. Hopefully you know that already. So life science. Alright, how do you make this go all the way down to the bottom and still have those 2-inch margins? I'm going to turn on my proofreading marks. So what you'll do is you'll just space all the way down. So if you're wondering, okay, how do I get this all the way down to the bottom so I have that 2-inch margin? You press enter to get those spaces all the way down as close as you can. Now once you notice it going over onto the next page, then you notice, oh, too far, back up one. And there you go. That'll give you your 2-inch margins right at the bottom. I'm going to center these just so they look nice. So I don't know how many spaces this is in single space. It's around 16. So, but just go off of, okay, how close do I have to be to the bottom before it goes over onto the next page? Remember, you're going to have to adjust this because for me, you have to turn in 2 copies of this paper. Remember, you have to turn in for me the 2 copies. One copy has your name on it. That's the one that I am grading. The other one is for the STEM fair or the academic fair in the spring. We are believing by faith that Corona will be gone enough for us to have it. So we're going to keep going forward as if Corona won't exist then. So because of that, the judges can't know who you are. You can't leave your name here. So you have to get rid of it. If you just delete it, it's going to jump it out of that 2-inch margins, and you don't want that. So press enter again. So again, I messed it up a little bit. Oops, too far. So once you notice, whenever you press enter, once it goes over onto the next page, you notice, okay, that's too far. So back it up 1, and that'll put you right at that 2-inch margin again. But remember, you don't want your name here. So because you're going to turn in 2 copies on that Monday when we come back. You're going to turn in 1 copy that I will grade that has your name, 1 copy that does not have your name. So that way, that's the one for the judges. So this copy would be the one that would be for me, while the other copy, that would be the one that would be for the judges. So that's how you set up the title page. It's different from the rest of your paper. So that's why that one's a little bit harder. So be sure that you're being extra careful as you're going through it to make sure that you're following all the formatting directions over how you set it up. Alright, I think that was everything for how to set up that paper. I'm just making sure. I think I've covered everything talking about it as well. So 3 to 6 paragraphs where I talked about that, 3rd person, Times New Roman, double space, 1/2 inch indent, between 300 and 350 words, talked about formatting. I think I've gotten everything, which is good. Alright, so I emailed your parents about this, I think 2 days ago, so remind them of it today. Whenever they send in the picture of your quiz, I need to send at least a picture of your background paper, just so I know that you've already worked on the 2nd draft. Normally I would check in class to make sure that you have it, and obviously I can't check that. So because of that, you want to make sure that you have a picture of your computer screen, or maybe your parents printed it out for you so you can have it in front of you as you're looking over it. That's fine as well. So take a photo of that, or take a photo of your computer screen, or your parents could just email me the 2nd draft if you've already typed it up. I mean, most of you have typed it up, So you can go ahead and email me a copy of the second draft, and I'm just checking to make sure that you have worked on it. I'm not grading it, so I'm not grading it again, but it's just so I can check to make sure that you are working on it. So that's what I'll need today. I'll need that quiz that you took, and then I'll need just a copy of the second draft of your background paper. Alright, I think that's pretty much everything I needed to go over with you. If you have any questions about it, or how to format or how to set up your paper, be sure to email me, ask me lots of questions. So again, this is due not on the 9th, it's on the 12th now, so you have an extra weekend. But don't just keep putting it off. Make sure that you are working on it a little bit every single day so it's not overwhelming. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and give you your homework with the quiz and stuff. I'll let it stop just a little bit early so that way you still have time to study and to do your classwork and to take the quiz. So go ahead and we'll start just a little bit early for you. Alright, your homework for tonight, you're going to work in this book. You're going to do the next section, so let me get over there for you. Alright, it's page 17. You're going to do the nervous knowledge, so the parts about the central nervous system. And then we haven't talked about the endocrine system yet, but this will help you to get started for it. So the glandular identification, you're going to do both parts. So you're just doing just the front page. So you're doing the part with the nervous system, and you're going to do the part with the endocrine system. So we'll check that tomorrow when you come back. So again, I need the quiz today, and I need just a picture of your background so I can check to make sure that you worked on it. And I'm going to go ahead and let you go. So